Hi, I'm Jaini Jailin, Mojo reading instructor and keeper of the celebrification lists. Coach and Ademus went over the theory regarding yang and yin gesturing, which was awesome, and now I'm going to get into some of the celeb samples actually doing yin and yang gesturing in real life and how that works out. Yang gesturing is characterized by front of the hands, has a power tension arc, so rigid in the wrists, also coming out of the personal space into the common space. There's articulate, it's like conducting, it's structured movement, articulation essentially, and so there's a lot of moving, conducting, pointing out in space, enumeration, and that's yang gesturing. The yin gesturing is characterized with back of the hands, with a looseness, not characterized with the tension that yang gesturing would be characterized with. Also a lack of power arc, more free-form, free-flowing type movements. Also staying within the personal space, sort of the halo effect, and not coming out into the common space as much. And the movements again are free-form, not structured. They go with the stream of thought, consciousness, thoughts of the right brain powers. When someone is doing the gesturing that's native to their momentum powers, their first two powers, that will be, their natural state gesturing. And when someone is doing gesturing that is native to their modulation powers or their third and fourth powers, that's what we call altered state gesturing. The adaptives will prefer or will have as their natural state gesturing the yin gesturing. So again, that back of the hands, the free-form gesturing, whereas the directives will have as their natural state gesturing the yang gesturing. So the power arc gesturing, the tensioning in the wrist coming out into the common space, that will be native to those directive mojos. So yang gesturing is natural for the directive mojos, whose source and tandem power starts in the left side of the brain, and the yin gesturing will be natural for the adaptive mojos, whose source and tandem powers start in the right side of the brain. Now we'll get into the celeb samples, and we'll start off with Naiji Ayan Hirsi Ali and her interview with Jennifer Byrne. So in the beginning of the interview, Ayan is patiently listening to the moderator, but with the directive energy of a hunting awaiting engagement. Her hands are folded in a resting position, and that's kind of the yin gesturing. But she yangs it. There's tension in that resting, in that those folded hands have tension, a power arc to them, and she's also doing the thumb twiddling. The yang energy is coming out through that thumb twiddling that she's doing, while she's keeping the hands in that repose type yin position. But the yang gesturing or the yang energy can't help but come out in that thumb fidgeting. So she's clasping and having the hands folded, that's yin, but she's doing the yang again with the finger gesturing and the overall tensioning. Then she gets into, at 1:05, she does some finger steepling. And if you notice, if you look at it, it has a power arc. And when she begins to talk, she has an elegant femininity. But you'll see at 2:37, her movement has the slicing through the viscosity. She has power in her fingertips, meaning the power is going forward into the environment, and the wizard gesturing looks like it's interacting or interfacing with a natural law panel in the air. So you'll notice these gesturings that are very natural for her, and those are yang gesturings. Those are what we call the wizard gesturings, which are really cool. At 2:39, when the interviewer is asking her some, questions that have some real implications, and she's going to start going into her monologue. She does a peculiar gesturing, which is, you know, kind of a look of shrugging off chains, and that's something that Ni Alpha do. They're kind of, think of it as they're getting the mantle of their souls more comfortably on them, and flexing their independence of mind. So that, again, that's something that Ni Alpha will do, and has to do with that flexing of their Ni, of their independence of mind. Like, I know I'm going to say some things that are provocative and heavy, but they're true, and their natural law backs me up here. So, you know, I'm just gonna go and say them. At 2 minutes and 42 seconds, she does finger pointing. She has elegant gesturing, and it's yin gesturing, but there is a proactive, structured, controlling energy to it, which comes from her directive nature. So that's altered state for her. And then, you know, she'll be doing more yang gesturing, but she'll pierce in with that yang gesturing of the interfacing with the natural law console, or other more directive, conducting gesturings, and those are natural in momentum for her. She gains more energy when she starts doing those. With Ayan Hirsi Ali, like with other directives, when they're, you know, going more deferential, more diplomatic, elegant, sometimes going for feminine, they use the yin gesturing, you know, which has that back of the hands, often palms up to the ceiling, but when they do that, there's some flicking action to it, like sort of a kung fu fan, you know, stabbing outward and protruding from those fingers forward, and that is a yang trait. Whereas, you know, if this was real yin, because, you know, it is, you know, a yin gesturing, but the way they're doing it with their yang energy. But if it were, you know, real yin, it's slower, and it also collapses into position, sort of like a flower opening up. Kind of like my gesturing, or Nisha's gesturing, or Demas's gesturing, as opposed to like Ayan's gesturing or Coach's gesturing, which will have a jabbing, protruding, percussive energy to it. At 4 minutes and 18 seconds, and also in other spots during the interview, you'll notice how she keeps her hands on her legs, or other resting positions. So the gesturing is less demonstrative, and it also increases her elegance, which looks really nice. But notice that when she pulls it up, when she pulls up her gesturing, and she goes into her articulation mode, it has very much of a gun being pulled out of a holster look. So it's very quick, and then she goes into her momentum. And that would be different than you know, an adaptive doing that yin back of the hands gesturing. And it would be slower, it would be more freeform, it would be flowing, it wouldn't have that percussiveness that hers will have. It won't have that protruding, jabbing quality to it. It's more of a flowing, freeform gesturing movement that doesn't have a beginning, middle, end, if you will, a structured form to it. So when she comes up for gesturing, they have right away a wizard hand gesturing, like casting spells kind of look. You know, I'm trying to approximate it as much as I can from my adaptive nature. But if you look at Coach, he'll share the same thing. And if you look at this interview, you'll see those spell casting gesturings that she has, because she's a Naiji, and you know, because she might be in repose, but when she comes out to do her thing, she's ready and waiting for it with her directive energy. Ayan naturally uses an instructor kind of gesture, where she looks like she's holding an implement in her thumb and her first two fingers, and that's a way of punctuating the articulation sort of a, a teacher. It's a role that Naiji are very comfortable with, the role of teacher and instructor. And so she's doing that in the interview, so you'll be able to see that. And she's kind of letting you know at those points that what she's saying is something that you need to be paying attention to. It's important. And so again, it punctuates the articulation, and she's using the thumb and the first two fingers, that chalk action, someone holding chalk, a teacher holding chalk and writing, do that punctuation. Also, you can see that when Hyeon does her forward claw gesturing, that it's a yang gesturing that anyone can do, but when she does it, there's a clear tension in the claw and a power arc when she does it, and it's natural. That's something, that power arc is something that's natural for directives. They just natively think to do that, to have that power arc, to grab, to get into the environment, to move it, to conduct it, even if it's just, in an ideas kind of way, not a physical or visceral kind of way. So when she does that wizard claw gesturing when she's articulating and holds that 5-finger position like that, there's a power arc in the fingers and in the wrist, and into the arms and shoulders as well. Then you have VIZ David Beckham in his interview with Craig Ferguson in 2011. So when he first comes in and they shake hands, you'll notice a difference in the baseline residual tensioning in both of their shoulders, the David Beckham and Craig Ferguson. David Beckham clearly has the gunslinger shoulder tensioning, whereas Craig Ferguson does not. So take a look at that. David Beckham has that classic hunter way of doing the gesturing, which is to put the hands on the chair armrest or on their own leg. It's a form of subjective refrainment that's comfortable, but notice the tension that is in that movement, in that gesturing, even at repose, with his hand on his leg or the hand on the armrest. There is a great deal of tension there, and that's directive tensioning when the hand is still at rest. And it's sort of like having the hand at rest at the handle of a gun, getting ready for engagement. So the hand is resting on a gun or a tool, and when it comes up, it has a tensioned quality, and conductive and structured quality, and then it comes back down once he's done with engaging in what he needed to engage in. When David does the classic back of the hands, fingers pointing towards the ceiling gesturing, it's a classic yin gesturing, but notice how quick and percussive the gesturing is, and then there's residual tensioning in it. There's still a power arc in the wrists and the palms and in the fingers. That's not part of, that's not something that an adaptive would do when doing that gesturing. That is a directive doing yin gesturing. Something else that I've alluded to and that will help you tell whether someone is a directive through their gesturing is even if they're going for a more elegant, restrained game, playing it cool, or waiting their time, is that gunslinger quality. So how their hands go from the ready position, whether it's on their legs, on their armrest, wherever, into the engagement position and doing their thing and structuring, and then, or even doing altered yin, and then come back to that position. That's something to hone your lens to, because it's a good indication of whether someone is directive or adaptive. Another thing is awareness versus unawareness, and this is not the aware or unaware of Ji and Zhai. That's emotional awareness. This is directive awareness, which means structured articulation awareness. So when the hand comes from a rest position or at the ready position, and then moves up in the air and does something specific and comes back down. Job accomplished. With adaptives, they gesture the way they talk, which is stream of consciousness, like myself, without an ending. So often our gestures for adaptives will come up and sort of just linger there for a second and then come back down once nothing else happens. But there wasn't really a beginning, middle, end to the gesturing arc, if you will. Directives, even when they're doing yin, there is the beginning, middle, and to the gesturing arc. It is serving a purpose that goes along with the articulation, goes along with their agenda, what they're trying to get accomplished. So adaptives don't natively do that, even when they do yang gesturing, directive gesturing. And there's, again, that uncertainty with the gesturing because there's no beginning, middle, end, and so we're just going and doing stream of consciousness. So knowing when that gesturing has had a complete motion or has sent a complete message is not part of the way that adaptives think, and so their gesturing follows along with that, and so it's the free form stream of consciousness gesturing. Whereas again, directives, even if they're doing yin gesturing, there is a story that they're telling with their gesturing arc. Also, when you see any mojo have their hand on the leg or on the armrest for an extended period of time, pay attention to whether it looks like it remained there for that long because the person has forgotten about it, or because they want it to be placed there. There's a big difference between those. In the case of David Beckham, he has his hands on his leg and his armrest a lot. He's clearly positioning it there, though. You know, he has his hands exactly where he wants them to be. It's very conscious positioning on his part. They're there because he wants them to be there. And at 2 minutes 50, you see him with the back of the hands movement and the fingers up to the ceiling, and it has that jabby percussive movement that with the power arc and tensioning that directives will have in their gesturing. So take a look at that. Now we have Naizi Christian Bale and his interview with Chuck the Movie Guy for the movie The Dark Knight. You'll notice that he has tension in the shoulders. The way he's positioning himself in the chair, he's holding himself at the ready position. So you'll notice that about Christian Bale in his interview. Even though it's yin ready to move forward. So we've talked about this with David Beckham, some with Ayaan Hirsi Ali, something that directives will do. They'll do that elegant game, you know, more restrained, trying to be, you know, more deferent, more diplomatic, because they are guests in an interview. And so, so they'll have more yin gesturing, more refrained gesturing, but they are ready to go at any moment's notice, and they're looking for that moment. They're looking for the moment of engagement. And when he puts, you'll see when he puts his fists together during the interview at one point, there is a clear power arc to it. There's, you know, all the way from, you know, the shoulders, through the forearms, through the wrists, through the palm of the hand, and to the other one. There's a power arc to it. Even I'm trying to imitate it here, but it's hard for me to do that because I don't naturally, as an adaptive, I don't put tension in my wrist, the palm of my hands. My nature is to be free-formy and flowing, so that's different. And so, and even when he was doing then, you know, this yin spooling gesturing that he does at one point, there's a percussive quality to it, like you're hitting something, and that is because, you know, that's what directives do. They want to hit and move the environment and make it go the you know, the way their agenda says it's supposed to go. when he does that inward claw gesturing, so stirring gesturing, looks like stirring a pot, looks like stirring things around his stomach area. You'll want to compare this, for example, to the Gumby claw of a Nijai or a Nizai, because they'll do this type of movement also, but you'll notice some key differences between him being a directive versus them as adaptives. So it's a gesturing you'll see them doing a lot, but the tensioning will be different. The tensioning with Christian Bale, there's tensioning there again when he's doing it throughout the wrists and then the fingers and in the hands, and also there is a power arc to the movement, the gesturing that he's doing, because even though he's doing a yin gesturing, he is again a directive mojo, so he'll approximate the yin gesturing, but those things you kind of would have to be thinking about it the whole time to actually like fully imitate a true yin gesturing. And at that point, if he was truly imitating, then he actually wouldn't be doing his momentum powers anymore. He would be shutting down his momentum. He'd be going into modulation. So when he actually does that inward claw gesturing, even though it's yin gesturing, because of that tensioning and the energy that he's having and the percussive energy that he has when he's doing that motioning, it almost looks like a yang gesturing because of the way he's doing it. Also, when he makes the handshake-like motion going through the air, notice how it slices through with very little viscosity. That's something that's indicative of directive movement. And energy, and it also has a power arc again, that power arc that you'll hear me mention throughout, with the wrist, palm, and fingertips, and there is a forward momentum and drive that the fingers have, that's sort of like a stabbing movement or gesturing into the environment, that again is something that directive mojos will do in their gesturing and movement. Christian Bale uses a lot of soulful restraint with his Jai, which gives him the ability to control his percussive and outward-going movements. So they have a nice smoothness to them, like he has sort of an artistic control to his gesturing. But still notice this, despite that smoothness that he's putting on it with his power Jai, how easily the gesturing comes out into the common space. And how he's putting his wrists and his palms completely into the environment very comfortably. That's something that directives will do that will not be native or natural or comfortable for adaptives to do. So one thing that you'll notice with adaptives is that when they put their arms out, it doesn't tend to go out as far. And you'll see that with my gesturing, with Ademus' gesturing, with Nisha's gesturing. And even when we do put it out as far physically, as directives do it, it's sort of, you'll see that there's this losing of steam as the movement for an adaptive reaches its extension point, whereas with the directives, the movement will punch out with purpose. It won't lose steam at any particular point in the gesturing. And although Christian Bale does a good job with his Jai of modulating how the arm goes out, it does nonetheless extend out with easy power tension from the beginning all the way to the fully, extended, punched out or hand out extension position. Also notice at 2 minutes and 5 seconds the patting forward motion when he taps the air with his fingertips. He keeps his hands closer to the body in a more yin, less aggressive stance, but you can still see his directive nature in the Morse code-like tensed tapping quality of the gesturing. And again, he has a lot of good Jai use, so he uses that to smooth out his game. But you'll notice that that gunslinger tensioning in the shoulders, that's there the entire time. Even when he's doing the yin gesturing close to the body, the tension in his shoulders and in his wrists is pronounced throughout. He also has what we call the hunter hunch, and the hunter hunch is usually perceived as a full body cue, but in this case it's in the gesturing because he's using his arms to hold himself in, when he holds onto the chair in a perched position, like a hunter in a perch. Now let's talk about Givi Jennifer Lopez when she was in The Tonight Show in 2012 and some of her gesturing. When she comes in and waves, notice that the tension in her shoulders and her elbows and in her wrists. You'll also notice again that power arc in the whole arm and hand, and when she waves it moves vigorously. Adaptives also do wave vigorously, but when they do it, it has more jiggle in their hand and in their arm. Their whole movement has more jiggle to it. It doesn't have that tensioning that Jennifer Lopez movement will have. So when she waves, you don't see the jiggle. The movement cuts from side to side. When she gestures, she does the splaying of the hands and fingers, and she keeps them more in her personal space to make them more yin, but she projects more than an adaptive would when doing the gesturing. And the splayed fingers, again, those are not adaptive. They have tension in them when she's doing them, and there's a power in the fingertips. So these are sort of like jabs into the air, like a four-fingered jab. You'll notice when she takes her hand to her hair and sort of combs her hair. That's a very yin gesturing that's often associated with towers. And when towers do it, they have what's called a self-collapsing quality to it. So like when I do it, it has that collapsing of the wrists. And so that's something that when the gesturing is done naturally by adaptives, by towers, it has that self-collapsing quality to it. And so that will be part of the natural gesturing, that natural gesture. But when she does it, notice that she does that movement, but it still has that tensioning as she does it in her wrist. And to do it, to even approximate it, I have to really think about doing that, because naturally my hand and hands of adaptives will sort of just collapse and follow the form of the head and the hair, sort of conform to that, adapt to that as it goes along. It's a free-form thing, whereas hers is sort of, positioning the hair where she wants it to be, and it has a purposefulness and a structure and tensioning to the movement. You'll notice that she has her right hand on her leg, which is something that, again, directives do to be elegant, to show that they're not overtly forward. They're waiting to go into directive momentum. Her left arm is draped over and her hand is hanging in a comfortable position for yin. If it were just resting at repose, sort of just kind of free-forming. But notice that she keeps flexing her fingers into a semi-fist throughout. When as her arm rests there in that relaxed pose, she does flex her fingers into a semi-fist, and she's done it a few times throughout the interview that I have seen. So her arm is resting, which is yin, and her hand is dangling, which again is yin, and she's doing finger curls from time to time as her directive energy can't help itself. When she rubs her arm up and down with her own hand, notice the tension in her wrists as she does it. Again, similar to stroking your hair, when you run the hand through your arm, there will be pressure of coming up against the arm, and the arm structure itself can keep the hand in position as it travels upward or downward in the arm. For an adaptive, when they do that, their hand will be sort of floppy and sort of just follow the movement, the structure of the arm or whatever object it's caressing or touching. But and the pressure of touching that structure is kind of what's keeping the arm traveling along, the hand traveling along. But you'll notice with Jennifer, she's placing her hand and forming her hand into the proper stroking implement. It's positioning her hand, and then her hand becomes an implement that strokes her arm. Forming one's hands into implementation tools, that's a directive activity. So you'll notice this stroking of the arm at 1 minute 46. She does some double palm up movements. Again, that's a very yin gesturing, but notice when she does it, again, she does it with percussive energy, percussive movement, also with a stabbing of the hands and the fingers. And it's more of a planned action, planned structured action. The hands are down, in that ready position, or, that ready position of her, doing the yin, but doing the finger curls, and then she comes up and does her maneuver from the chair, her dance move, almost of the gestures, and then it comes back down, and then we'll come back up in the next engagement. And you'll notice that with the Shades of Me social alchemy groupings, especially with those in the same objective-subjective dichotomy like Jivai and Nizai, that they'll have similarities in their gesturing, but the difference in the Jivai is that the gesturing will be percussive. There'll be that stabbing and jabbing of the fingers, and of course there will be that greater overall tensioning in the gesturing, in the movement, and that power arc. The wheeling of the arms that you see Jennifer doing in the interview, it's something that you'll see adaptives doing, like Nizai or other objective perceivers. But when they do it, adaptives do it, it has a loosey-goosey kind of quality. The shoulders are, usually involved in it as well, and it doesn't have a start or stop point to it. It's freeform. But when Jennifer does it, it does. When she does, the gesture, she'll do these gestures, she'll do the windmills, and she'll hold. She'll do windmills, and then she holds, windmills, and holds. That's something that you won't really see the adaptives doing, because it again has this free-form stream of consciousness kind of quality, because it goes along with their thought process. It tends to sort of flow for adaptives, flow end over end, and sort of lands where it lands. But she's doing the yin gesturing and then stopping, yin gesturing, then stopping, and she tends to stop at a tension position. Jennifer does a hand-to-mouth gesture at 3 minutes 31 seconds, which is a classic yin gesture, but notice the tension of the hands as they come up, or the hand as it comes up to the mouth. It's held into position by some directive power. There's tensioning there, there's a power arc. So she's doing a yin motion, but that's directive thinking that is moving it there, propelling it there, and directing that gesture. Take a look at Naiji Russell Crowe in the David Letterman interview. So there's a gunslinger tension when he comes in, and he holds his hands by his side and keeps them there as opposed to swinging them naturally. and then comes up very purposefully and slices his arm through the air and then pops his hand into a handshake. So it's all very purposeful. There is tension and power arc to his movement. You know, he keeps it at his side until he's coming in to engage, and when he does, he slices through the air and he pops his hand into the handshake. When he's sitting down, Russell has that same repose position that Ayaan Hirsi Ali did in her interview. But again, you'll notice that his fingers have tension in them, and they're doing that directive fiddling, like thumbing a gun. At a minute 26, Russell does a yin gesturing when he's reenacting picking up a phone, and he does that, you know, surfer gesture. And he does it though in a very yang way. It has tension, you know, in the wrists, in the hands, in the fingers, in the gesture, and it's jerky, and there's a cutting through the air quality, a percussive quality that is unique to directive mojos. Then he does the classic yin back of the hands gesturing, but again, it has that tension, it's quick, and it has a percussive quality to it and that jabbing quality to it. At a minute 39, he does that Ni alpha interfacing with the natural law console that they do in the air. And again, you know, I can't do it, you know, I can approximate it, but it has that tension, that power arc, and that directive stabbing energy, pointing energy into the environment that directives will have, directive mojos will have in doing their gesturing. Russell's a classic example of Naiji wizard storytelling hands, sort of casting spells as he's telling his stories, very appealing and charming. He also does, you know, that yin spooling at times, but you'll see that it has tension and jabbing energy and that quickness that you won't be seeing with adaptives later on as they're doing their gesturing, the same type of gesturing. Then we have Zenai Grace Randolph in Comic-Con 2012 Think Hero TV interview. Her gesturing is percussive, it's stabby, she has that tension and power arc that comes from her shoulders through her arms all the way through her hands and through her fingertips and out into the environment. She's doing, you know, some of the yin gesturing that you'll see with adaptives, with the palms up and palms back, but it still looks yang as she's doing it. You know, she does more yin or deferent gesturing throughout the interview, but she does slip into some yang gesturing, like for example at 44 seconds, take a look at that. And when she does do the yang gesturing, you can see her picking up energy, picking up momentum. It's quicker and more natural, but she does tend to spend most of her time in modulation. There's another thing when it comes to Grace's yin gesturing, which is that even though she moves her arms in a yin gesture formation, besides the percussive quality that you'll see, the way that she goes into a splayed position, finger splayed, is different than it would be for an adaptive mojo. For an adaptive mojo, if the fingers become splayed, it's because of flopping, I guess you would say. Sort of this natural freeform motion, and the fingers sort of just flop open. It's kind of this, without even thinking, it's this unaware thing, I mean, and it just flops open. But she doesn't. When she does splay her fingers, it's because she pops them. It's purposefully done, and it's positioned that way. It's a a conscious popping of her fingers into that splayed position. That'll be different. That is something that directive motions will do and not adaptives. So since she pops those fingers into that open position, there's a lot more tension to the fingers for that reason. A difference you'll note between objective directives and subjective directives is that the objective directives will hold themselves more forward into the environment. This applies to a general leaning of the torso and a jutting of the head. So often objective directives often come out from a position of already being semi-jutted. And in this case, for grace, or in the case of gesturing, this applies to the set of the shoulders. The subjective directives, we've said that they have that gunslinger look to them, where their shoulders have enough tension that they're ready to move into engagement when that moment presents itself. With objective directives, it almost looks like Grace, being an objective directive, she's leaning into a wave or into the wind. The wind's coming at her and she has her shoulders turned slightly forward. That's part of gesturing for her as an objective directive. And it speaks to the tendency of objective directives of having that semi-jut or semi-forward lean on at all times. Grace has this, and where she's doing, even when she's doing her yin gesturing, like when she has her hand on the hip, she does have her shoulders turned forward, ready to charge forward, like in 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Next up, let's talk about Xeni Donald Trump and his Human Events interview on why American airports are third world. In that intro clip where you see him starting to talk, he's doing yang gesturing right off the bat with choppy hands. It starts off right away with the power arc, the tension in the shoulders all the way through the fingertips, and ready to engage in yang gesturing. Donald pushes forward with the gesturing akin to holding an instrument, and then he goes back to that original choppy hand position. And but notice how he pops his fingers out. So when he chops, he makes an instrument that he jabs with, and then he pops his fingers and goes back into that jabbing power position. Then it goes into the beginning of the interview, and you'll see that he has steepling he's doing a steepling gesture with his hands, which is a yin gesture, but again it has more tension and power arc to it than the gesture would have in its native form when an adaptive mojo would be doing it. The tension in his hands when doing the yin swatting away gestures, there's so much tension in a uniform positioning. The fingers are all together as a single unit that it almost looks like a flipper in a pinball machine. So there's a power unit between the palms and the fingers are together making a single strong unit, and they have a power tip. So they're flipping backward and forward. So although this is a yin gesture, it's almost yang because of the directive energy that's driving the gesture. And when he points and draws lines in the air, all of that has a yang slicing quality with low viscosity of a directive mojo. Donald has his arms back in a yin position, and he jabs out with the fingers, and the shoulders are tensed. Yin gesturing naturally goes with looseness of the shoulders. That's just a natural native thing for adaptives, and so the native natural way of doing yin gesturing. He's making movements with his arms and hands, but it starts mainly from the elbows down, almost even from the forearm down. The elbows stay rather locked in place at the rib cage. The shoulders stay locked forward like a linebacker going to tackle. And then the yin gesturing is happening within that context. Shoulders forward, elbows in, tension in. Most of the arm is actually locked, and then the lower flipper-like appendages move around, but they also have a rigidity to them, giving them that pinball machine-like quality. Next we have Jinai Simon Baker and his interview with David Letterman in 2012. When he comes in and he does that wave, there's the cutting of the air when he does it. It's a directive gesturing. With Simon, we note the same things that we do with the other directives that we've looked at, about the arms being positioned into repose, and then they come up and out into deliberate structured gestures, and then they come back down. So then he goes into the yin gesturing of taking his finger and placing it at the end of his chin. So that's taking a Zai pause. As David Letterman talks to him, speaks to him, sort of he's pausing, seeing how he's gonna take the volley that Letterman's sending to him. But he places it exactly on the chin. There's still tension in his hand as he does it, as if he is ready to turn into the other direction and go into directive mode. This will be different than, for example, if you see a Demas, a Zai Ni, doing that same gesturing, which they'll do often, since the Zai is their source power. He'll do that as well, but it doesn't have that tension. It'll be more free-form gesturing. It is resting there as opposed to positioned there. So you'll notice those differences in the gesturing within its natural state versus its altered state. So he's placing it there, his chin, and he's ready to go out. So he's not sinking into that subjective power, into the Zai in this case, that you would see with an actual adaptive, with Demas or with Jeff Goldblum, for example. He's placing it there like a fighter who places a back leg on a line that they're not going to move past, and they're going to go forward and launch off of that line. You'll also notice that he has a slight lean of the shoulders in a subtle, elegant way, not in the hunch of the hunters. It's leaning forward, like pulling a load, or going to tackle something, which is a gesturing and a movement that objective discerners will have. He's doing some yin gesturing in the interview with the back of the hands, but it goes along with all the body gesturing. You can't just take that in isolation, which is yang, the rest of the body gesturing and movement. And there's, besides the natural tension, directive tension that is in his hands itself as he's doing that yin gesturing. He uses his Zai elegantly to smooth out his game, similarly to Christian Bale, Nai-Zi, with his use of Zai. It's to smooth out the projection so that it's not so harsh or jarring or sudden, but the movement still has a natural power arc, and it smoothly cuts through the viscosity of the environment. Simon also does something that directives do, where they are further out from the body, which objective directives tend to do when they're gesturing, and when they're done, so they'll come out far from their body, and when they're done, they'll hold it in a position, in a semi-forward position or jutted position, prepared for that next move. He does this with his hand on his leg and on the armrest, which is his standard MO. But he also does one where he puts his gesture out, where he does it out towards Letterman, and then he comes back and he holds his hands out, similar to how objective directives leave their jutting, their head jut out. And after they jut or do that gesture, they come back, but not fully, not all the way. He does that with his projective hand gesturing. He projects, he does the hand gesturing, and then brings it back, but not all the way, back to repose, back to his body. He sort of holds it out there ready for the next volley. At 2 minutes 50, you'll notice that he's also doing that, his hands are in repose, but he's doing that finger hand fiddling and tension and the clenching and unclenching of the hands. And it's even more pronounced than Jennifer Lopez when she does it. And he does it with his left hand that's resting on the armrest. It's his, directive energy pulsating, kind of like an engine revving. Simon has quick percussive movements, also the pointing and jabbing. He does it elegantly by putting some zai into it to restrain him a little bit. But when he does do those yang gesturings, it punctuates easily and readily, and he also does this movement, this directive movement where he's holding an instrument, like he's holding a poking stick or holding a chalk that we saw Hayan Hirsi Ali doing, for example. He does both of those, as well as pointing and jabbing, and he does them in rapid succession with tension and speed, and there's a confidence as he shifted between these 4 or 5 yang gesturings. They were easy and natural for him to do. There's lots of tension and momentum, and it's a similar thing to Grace Randolph when she was doing a lot of yin gesturing throughout the interview, but then she switches at those 44 seconds into that yang gesturing. It's very natural for her to do so. Her energy picks up when she's doing that. Like Simon Baker, Simon also has that energy pickup when he starts doing the yang movements. At 4 minutes and 35 seconds, Simon does some very pointed yang gesturing that looks very natural and quick. It has that tension and percussive energy to it, so take a look at that. At 4 minutes and 35 seconds, Simon does some very pointed yang gesturing, which looks very natural and quick and has a tension and percussive energy to it, and it's indicative of his directive nature, so take a look at that. Now let's talk about Naizi Numi Rapace and her interview with Craig Ferguson in 2011. When she comes in and does her hand wave, it has directive tension and a power arc to it that we already talked about before with directive mojos. When she points, the energy is strong, it's directive, there's tension in the wrists. When she has her hands on the armrests, you'll notice that she has her hands, they're on the armrest, but she's still sort of clawing them. There's directive energy that's going into those armrests. So it's yin to have your hands resting on a chair or interlaced at your lap. But with directives, they'll sometimes outlet, when they're trying to have more of a deferent, elegant game. They don't want to seem too forward. They'll do more of a yin gesturing, like resting on a chair, except that they'll have to outlet their directive energy by doing yang gesturing within the yin. So she has her hands on the armrest, which is yin, except that she's clawing the armrest. Again, the directive energy is pulsating. She has a lot of good jai development, so it smooths her motions, similar to Christian Bale. We saw him, so giving her a more elegant feral quality. and also remove some of the perceived harshness of that yang gesturing can have, but her movement still cuts through the air. There's low viscosity, there's still that tension in the fingers, but it has more softness to it because of the good jai use. That's a subtle difference, but it's something that you can definitely pick up when you train your eyes to Mojori. That good jai use does affect the gesturing, but it never makes it look like anything but a directive doing yin gesturing. It adds that good jai use, adds adaptive modulation maturity to her gesturing, which is which is a higher level game that she has. So you can actually see development in a person's gesturing as well. Then let's take a look at Jinai Mingna Wen in the Today Show interview. Mingna is clasping her hands, again like we've seen other directives do, but again she has that tension and the power arc that all directive mojos will have in their movements. She has elegant movements, they're percussive with stabbing motion and that tension in the wrists. There's also a beginning, middle, end to the gesturing, meaning there's a structure to it. There's a message that it's supposed to send out and she accomplishes that and then, comes back down and waits for the next engagement. Most of the directives that we've seen so far do tend to use altered yin gesturing as part of their game, wanting to come off more deferential in the interviews. The yang gesturing has a more controlling energy. It can look like you're trying to take over or to control the environment, which may not be appropriate for a guest on a TV show. So, take that into account when taking a look at these different directives. But that it's still directives doing yin gesturing because you can't take away that native tension, that power arc, that percussive energy, that stabbing of the fingers, that structured articulation thought process that comes out even when they're doing yin gesturing.